Hello and welcome to the Azure Stack HCI Show, the last show before Microsoft Ignite. Hello, Manfred. How are you doing today?
Hello, Sven. I'm fine and looking forward to our show.
Yeah, and looking forward to Ignite. So this is the reason
Yeah.
why we decided not to have another Azure Stack HCI show before Ignite, because we both know that so many things are happening around Azure Stack HCI. But unfortunately, we are not allowed to talk about that. And so it makes sense to wait until Ignite. The next Azure Stack HCI show will be in the Ignite week on Friday, not at 12 p.m. German time, but 2 p.m. And the reason is that Manfred will be in Chicago.
Yes.
And so we will stream live from Chicago and Munich. And I'm super curious to share all these insights with you.
Yeah, and it's at the end of the Ignite week, so we will have nearly all the announcements here. Yeah, mainly with focus on Azure Stack HCI and the hybrid services. And yeah, we have some time difference, you might know, between Germany and US, Chicago. So if the Ignite area is already open, I will live stream together with Sven from the Ignite area and otherwise from the hotel. But we will bring all the news to you around the hybrid solutions in Azure Stack HCI. It's 22nd November,
Yeah,
I think so, correct?
absolutely. So don't miss our next Azure Stack HCI show. And for those who are based in Germany and are able to speak German, we recommend to visit the hybrid IT Cloud Conference in Würzburg, November 27th and 28th. 2 days packed, completely full of Azure Stack HCI news, a lot of live demos, a lot of top speakers, MVPs, Microsoft experts. So it's a very nice and great opportunity to meet each other, to learn a lot. And looking forward to that as well. So today, our topic is about mythbusting. It's about your daily business experience. Manfred will share some things. We can talk about Azure Migrate. There's a new public preview for around about 2 weeks to migrate VMware to Azure Stack HCI. So this morning in the hybrid show, Eric and Manfred had a 1-hour session talking about that in detail, but maybe Manfred can give a short summary how relevant this is. And we would like to be interactive with you today. So if you have any questions top of mind about Azure Hybrid, Azure Stack HCI, so please share these thoughts or questions in the chat, and we try to talk about them. And if you have questions, we want to answer them. But of course, we prepared something, and let's start with that. So Carl has one comment or question. Isn't sad? That's not good, Carl, that you are sad. Azure Stack HCI sessions are mainly in person, but certainly Manfred and others will spread the word. Absolutely, we will do. There will be some pre-days for Windows Server 2025 and for Azure Adaptive Cloud. So I guess these pre-days, of course, will be in person.
Yeah,
but
it's on Monday, yes. Yeah.
some online sessions as well. But as always, I think there will be a huge blog post from Cosmos Darwin or his team where all the details will be shared. And of course, on Friday, we will go into that details and explain what this means. So yeah, looking forward to that session. And let's start with some mythbusting topics. So one of the things I'm really happy to share is the question: who is eligible to get the Azure hybrid benefits for Azure Stack HCI, because we have done so many licensing trainings in the past, and we always talked about the situation that there's not a consistent communication about that. And I learned a lot in the last couple of weeks about Azure hybrid benefits. So one thing I learned is that there are a lot of Azure hybrid benefits for SQL Server, Windows Server, and Azure Stack HCI. And these are not the same. So I know that in most of the documentations, we are only talking about Azure hybrid benefits. We are not going into the details what Azure hybrid benefits we are talking about. That's why I thought that Azure hybrid benefits are Azure hybrid benefits. And if there's a documentation saying this is what you need to get Azure hybrid benefit, well, this should be true for all of these options, but that's not correct. So let's talk about Azure hybrid benefits for Azure Stack HCI. The rumors or the questions in the market were about who is eligible to get Azure Stack HCI Azure hybrid benefits, because Azure hybrid benefits for Azure Stack HCI have a lot of benefits, like getting Azure Stack HCI for $0, getting AKS on Azure Stack HCI for free, getting the option to use the license cost on Azure as well, and so on. Most of these benefits are included in Azure hybrid benefits for Windows Server. So for Windows Server, you can use the licensed course Windows Server on premises and in the Azure cloud. You can use Azure Kubernetes services. All these things are included in Azure hybrid benefit for Windows Server and in Azure hybrid benefit for Azure Stack HCI. But only the option to get Azure Stack HCI for free and to activate the Windows Server subscription add-on on Azure Stack HCI is something where you get the enterprise agreement for, or a CSP subscription of Windows Server Data Center. And when you're looking at the docs.microsoft documentation, you very often see that Azure hybrid benefit, you need software assurance or a subscription. There are no differences made between the licensing channels. So this is very confusing. And even if you're going to the Azure portal and you want to activate these Azure hybrid benefits on Azure Stack HCI, there is no comment about only eligible for enterprise agreement customers, only eligible for CSP data center customers. So that's why I and a lot of our experts outside thought that every software assurance is eligible. And I got a lot of feedback from different people at Microsoft because I raised these questions: who is eligible, enterprise agreement or every software assurance? And I got both answers. So that's why I'm happy now to share the final thoughts about that. So on that screen here, you can see the official license terms. And we always say official license terms is the only thing that is binding. So there could be a mistake in a documentation. There could be a mistake on a website, on a PowerPoint, but the license terms are what's relevant. And when you go to the official license terms, in the top segment, you can choose the program. So the licensing channel where you get these licenses from. And here you see the enterprise agreement, enterprise subscription. And when you scroll down in the official Azure part of the license terms, you will find information about Azure hybrid benefit. And it gets more concrete. It's about Azure hybrid benefit for Windows Server. And here it's described what this means. You need data center or standard plus software assurance or a subscription. So everything fine so far. But when we look at the licensing for dedicated hosts, then it's only eligible for data center. So what is a dedicated host? On Azure, you can have a dedicated host. You can say, I want to have an Azure server managed by Microsoft, and this dedicated host should have, let's say, 72 cores, then you can use the Azure Hybrid Benefit for Windows Server to bring these from on-premises to the Azure cloud, and then you can do whatever you want to do from the Windows Server licensing perspective on this dedicated host. And here in the license term, you can see that it's not only available for customers on a dedicated host, but also on an Azure Stack HCI cluster. And you can see the comment that Azure Hybrid Benefit for Azure Stack HCI is available for enterprise or CSP customers only. So this comment in the enterprise agreement license terms was available for multiple of quarters. So from the beginning of the availability of this program. When we go to the license terms of Microsoft Customer Agreement, so this contains CSP, Cloud Solution Provider, and you scroll down, you can see the same comment. You can see that it's only available for EA or CSP customer. But, and this is something we have to change hopefully very fast, if you choose the open value or open value subscription. This is a licensing channel where you get software assurance from, where you get subscription from. And when you scroll down to the Azure Hybrid Benefit, you will find no comment that Azure Stack HCI, Azure Hybrid Benefit, is only available for enterprise agreement or CSP customers. This is something we have to change, absolutely, because if you are a customer of this channel, so open value or open value subscription, and you see that in all documentations on docs.microsoft, on learn.microsoft, on Azure Portal, on Microsoft websites, there's no limitation to EA. Everyone is talking about subscription or CSP, and you buy software assurance from the open channel, then you might think, okay, I'm eligible, but you are not. So please wait some more days or weeks until we have changed all the official documentation. Hopefully it will be done very soon. But in the meantime, do not forget, this is the official license term.
Yeah, this addition you mentioned is very important, because when I look at this, as the attendees might know, I'm not a Microsoft employee, so sometimes I have a different view on the things. And when we look at the Azure portal, so let's think I'm a customer that only uses Azure pay-per-use. So then I do not have any of this enterprise agreement license terms or things like this. I just made an Azure tenant with an Azure subscription. I use my credit card. I'm here in pay-per-use. And then when I go to the Azure Stack HCI configuration page, I get a screen where I can exchange Windows Server Data Center without any license information added there, with enabled software assurance to Azure Stack HCI. This is the text there. And when I then look in my open value license agreement, I don't have a sentence that says, no, it's not possible for you. So from the customer perspective, I get the information on the Azure page. I can exchange this. And my license contract doesn't say that this is not eligible for me. And from my point of view, when I'm a customer in Germany, Microsoft cannot expect that I read all the license terms to read in enterprise agreement to find out that my license contract, the open value, is not eligible to use this hybrid benefit. So if you want to be absolutely safe, maybe you should follow the information and recommendation from Sven. If you look into the Azure portal, maybe you could think about what I said, that there's no information that this is limited to specific license agreements.
Absolutely. And Carl has one more question. If Windows Server calls are required for accessing Azure Stack HCI or Windows Server VMs running on Azure Stack HCI. And the question is yes and no. It depends on where you get the license from. So when you license your guest operating system the classic way, so you attach Windows Server license to Azure Stack HCI, then of course you need Windows Server CALs. The only reason or the only option where you do not need Windows Server CALs for Windows Server is when you have Microsoft 365 licenses. Some of them include the Windows Server CALs, and the other is that you license Windows Server in Azure. So when you are using Azure and when you purchase Windows Server through Azure, no Windows Server CALs are needed. And this is the same for Azure Stack HCI if you license Windows Server through Azure. And here on the screen, you can see the Azure portal in the configuration part when you are connected to your Azure Stack HCI cluster. And you can see there's Azure Hybrid Benefit, and below there's the Windows Server subscription add-on. And this Windows Server subscription as add-on is a licensing option for the guest operating system where you are purchasing Windows Server through the Azure portal. So you are paying Windows Server with your Azure credits, and it's exactly the same what you get when you purchase Windows Server for your Azure VM. So you can see here there's a purchase button. And if you activate the Azure Hybrid Benefit, then you can see that when the Azure Hybrid Benefit is activated, there's no longer a purchase button for Windows Server subscription add-on. There's an Activate Benefit button. And this Windows Server subscription comes for free when you activated the Azure Hybrid Benefit. So the Azure Hybrid Benefit, this is what we talked about the last 5 minutes, is something what you can activate when you have Windows Server Data Center, including software assurance, so for enterprise agreement customers, or if you have Windows Server Data Center CSP subscription, then you are allowed to activate the Azure Hybrid Benefits, and then you get the Windows Server subscription add-on for free. And this subscription does not require Windows Server CALs, but only for this Windows Azure Stack HCI cluster. So if you have a separate Windows Server environment, of course you need Windows Server CALs for that environment, because this licensing does not include CALs. You can use for other scenarios very similar to the Essentials edition of Windows Server, but this do not require the CALs. Yeah, so yes, you need Windows Server CALs, but not if you are using the Azure Hybrid Benefit and activated the Windows Server subscription. Of course, you are allowed to license Azure Stack HCI pay as you go with the $10 per physical active core per month, and then you can activate the Windows Server subscription add-on, but you have to pay for that, around about $23 per core per month. But the benefit of this is that you can activate and deactivate it on a daily basis if you want to, so very similar to the Azure portal.
The question regarding these CALs is often how to do it from the technical perspective, because we know that we need an Active Directory domain for the Azure Stack HCI cluster. And now the recommended configuration for this is to have an infrastructure domain where you have 2 domain controllers for redundancy and where you add your Azure Stack HCI nodes. And in this infrastructure domain, you only have administrative users, so no workload users. And for administrative users, so that really do administrative business, you don't need client access licenses, even in a traditional Windows Server environment. And so if you separate the domains into an infrastructure domain and a workload domain, then your workload domain itself that hosts the file servers, the application servers, and so on, this workload domain will run on Azure Stack HCI, and then you can have a scenario when you choose the right licensing option where you don't need any client access licenses.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, this Windows Server subscription does not require Windows Server calls, but if you are running any server, any service on top of that, that requires RDS calls, these are not covered. So these RDS calls are needed. Good. So one more thing I would like to talk about today is the Azure Stack HCI OEM license. So I posted about that license already twice. A lot of people shared that information. A lot of people liked that information. But unfortunately, I did not get any feedback on my LinkedIn post so far. If you already sold it, if you have any experience, what you think about this new licensing option, because I'm very interested in trying to find out if this is a new licensing option you are really interested in, or your customers are interested in, or if there are any blockers why you are not able to sell it or to use it in the scenario. So for those who are not familiar with the Azure Stack HCI OEM license, I think that's a very good option to license Azure Stack HCI, especially for customers who do not want to care about managing their licensing. Because when you have an enterprise agreement, when you have a CSP solution, and maybe you only have a small cluster or one cluster or maybe a data center, then it's more or less easy to manage your licensing and your physical cores. But think about a customer with hundreds or thousands of sites, retail stores or manufacturing or things like that. I think it's very difficult to monitor how many nodes, how many cores you have on each side, and if you have assigned the correct amount of enterprise agreement or CSP nodes or cores to all of these sites. It's very difficult. The good thing about the HCI OEM license is that this is a license that is integrated into your hardware. So very similar to a Windows client PC. The license is integrated in the BIOS. So you are starting the PC, and then Windows 11 will start. Everything is licensed. And that's very similar to the Azure Stack HCI option, but there's no way to do that licensing after point of sales because it's integrated in the physical hardware. So when you want to use this licensing, you have to order it together with the hardware. And it's a prepaid version. It's licensing that is valid for the complete lifetime of the hardware. And when you replace hardware, you buy new hardware, you buy a new license. You do not have to care about transferring cores from one hardware to the other. Super simple. And included in the Azure Stack HCI OEM license is the Azure Stack HCI fee, is Azure Kubernetes services, unlimited on this license's hardware, and Windows Server guest operating system up to the version that you bought the Azure Stack OEM license for. So when you have an Azure Stack HCI OEM license with the version 2022, you are allowed to use Windows Server 2022, 2019, 16, 12R2, and so on. As long as they are supported, it makes sense. When they are not supported, we do not recommend to do that. So very soon we will have Windows Server 2025, and very soon we will have a new Azure Stack HCI license with 25 as well. And then you can use up to Windows Server 2025. So I see a lot of questions and comments are coming, so let's go through them one after the other. A question regarding forthcoming solution update. Is it true that in 24.11 it will be possible to scan the VMs on the Azure Stack HCI nodes and get restored migrated VMs to be Azure HCI Arc registered? Manfred, is this true
So
or not?
important about this is the current version of Azure Stack HCI is 23H2 version 2408. So we talked about this release in the last Azure Stack HCI show, I think so. There's no public information about the version number of the next release, if it will be 2411 or 2412 or something else. So we cannot confirm if there will be a 2411 release, and we cannot say anything about this thing that is mentioned about scanning VMs and import them. The interesting thing is when you look at backup software vendors, and the person who had the question has added this, that he has migrated VMs with Veeam to Azure Stack HCI, and they didn't show up in the Azure portal. And Veeam, for example, but also Commvault and other backup software vendors describe this in their license, not in their license, in their technical information, and they say it's possible today to back up virtual machines from Azure Stack HCI. For sure, it's possible to restore data, but if you have a full restore of a virtual machine that maybe was deleted before and it does not show up anymore in the Azure portal, it will be recovered as a local machine. It's fully functional, but it will not show up in the Azure portal currently. So they all say, when you look at Commvault, Veeam, that this is a current situation. So there, maybe we could see some announcement that they are working on something. But if you migrate virtual machines, you mentioned this in the second part of your question, from VMware to Azure Stack HCI, then since 2 weeks or about 2 weeks, we have Azure Migrate for VMware to Azure Stack HCI in a public preview. And this is the only current supported way to migrate virtual machines from VMware to Azure Stack HCI and show them fully in the Azure portal. We will spend some minutes on this later when we talk about the Azure Migrate news. Yeah.
There's one question from Carl. So customer has Azure Stack HCI OEM license 2022. Can they purchase 2025 for the same hardware? Well, that's an answer I'm not able to give at the moment, but maybe. So what I have not told so far is that you can purchase after point of sales licenses for additional nodes. So the OEM can offer you a 60 core license for your 60 core hardware. This is integrated into the hardware. And when you connect your node with Azure, it realizes automatically that there's a prepaid version and the benefits are activated. If you add additional cores after point of sales, the OEMs, HPE, Lenovo, and Dell, these are the three who, that offer these prepaid license, are able to sell additional licenses in 2 core packs. What is not decided yet, and we had a lot of requests about that, if there's an upgrade option. An upgrade option from 22 to 25, only a licensing option that does not have to be integrated in the BIOS, because Azure Stack HCI does not make a difference if it's 22 or 25. AKS does not make a difference. Only the Windows Server guest operating makes a difference. From the technical perspective, a customer is able to install and activate Azure Windows Server 2025 on the hardware, even if the OEM license is only 2022. So from the technical perspective, it's possible, because on your Azure Stack HCI, the Windows Server subscription add-on will be activated. So one of the benefits of this license is that you do not need Windows Server calls. So very similar to the Azure Hybrid benefit for Azure Stack HCI option. So from technical perspective, you already can use 2025 after the release. But from the licensing perspective, and this is what Manfred and I talk about so often, only because something is possible from the technical perspective, that does not allow you from the licensing perspective in any kind of way that you do that. But when you are able to purchase a kind of step our upgrade version of Azure Stack HCI license, then this only covers the Windows Server part, because again, Azure Stack HCI is already licensed, AKS is already licensed. It's only about how to upgrade Windows Server to the latest version. And maybe something will come. Maybe we will announce something at Ignite or later. I'm curious about that because Windows Server 2025 is coming soon. So yeah, let's wait for Ignite, and hopefully something is coming.
Perfect.
Cool. So Manfred, you already mentioned the migration from VMware to Azure Stack HCI. So maybe you want to show something.
Yeah, I can share my screen, and when we can have a look at this topic. So when we go to the official Azure Stack HCI documentation on learn.microsoft.com, then we have this section Migrate. And the Migrate section says manually migrate. This is for 2H2 only, migrate using SCVMM, also only for the previous version. And then we have the migrate using Azure Migrate. There's no information regarding the version. Important, this Azure Migrate story only works with Azure Stack HCI 23H2, so the latest version. And it's available, I would say, since April for Hyper-V VMs. And it's still in preview. It's not finally released, but you can use this on your own decision, on your own risk. It works very good. So it will not destroy any VMs. And if a VM will not be successfully migrated, the VM is still running on the source host. So for Hyper-V, we have the situation that we can here find the architecture diagram, and the Azure Migrate works with two appliances. It uses a source appliance. We can see this on the left-hand side, the Azure Migrate appliance on our Hyper-V host, and a target appliance on the Azure Stack HCI cluster. These appliances are connected together, and the virtual machines are replicated from the source environment to the target environment. And as you might know, replication does not change anything on the source VM, but it pre-creates the target VM. The delta information is replicated, and you can test the success of the replication before you decide to finalize the migration and switch to the new VM on the Azure Stack HCI cluster. This is done on a per VM basis. So you can migrate single VMs, you can migrate 5 VMs in a block, 10 VMs in a block. So you can select several VMs to migrate, but it's not required that you decide to migrate all your VMs to Azure Stack HCI. So this is already available since a few months. What's very, very new is the migration for VMware VMs. It's absolutely the main architecture is identical to the architecture we have for the migration of Hyper-V VMs, but for sure, when you migrate from VMware, then you also have to convert the virtual machine, because a VMware virtual machine cannot natively run on Azure Stack HCI. This machine has to be converted from the VMware virtual machine format to an Hyper-V virtual machine format, because Hyper-V is the hypervisor in Azure Stack HCI. We also have an Azure Migrate appliance. This is a virtual machine that is running in your VMware environment. This virtual machine is downloaded in the Azure portal. We have a target appliance that is populated on the Azure Stack HCI cluster. And as we can see here, it's again a continuous replication from VMware to Azure Stack HCI. And for every VM, you can decide when to switch over to the Azure Stack HCI environment. So for Leonard, who had the question regarding his migration with Veeam, if you want the virtual machines to show up in the Azure portal today, then you should use the Azure Migrate for VMware VMs to Azure Stack HCI. That is in detail described here in the Learn article. If you look at the documentation from your backup vendor, you could read some additional lines in this information. Currently, it's not possible to show these machines in the Azure portal. I often have the situation that customer says it's not important that existing VMs show up in the Azure portal. These are our old VMs. For us, it's important that they are up and running, that they are high available, that they work. But we create new VMs via the Azure portal. This is possible. You can also have a mix. From my point of view, the target should be to have them all listed in the Azure portal, because you have a lot of additional advantages if they are managed in the Azure, if they are visible in the Azure portal and then managed in the Azure portal. This is an important point. If you go through the article, you will see these are many steps for the migration, but they work very well. They are very well documented. And we have an additional step for enabling the guest management. This is not done automatically. This is not required, but it's recommended to do this. And this is done on a per VM basis. Yeah. What's important regarding this Azure Migrate? In the past, I always told that Azure Migrate is for free. Does not cost anything. This was correct in the past, but now there is an update for Azure Migrate that says it's for free if you finalize your migration within 180 days. So when we configure Azure Migrate, we have this replication here. And as I mentioned, the replication is activated on a per VM basis. So I could say, okay, this virtual Windows server is replicated today. We start at 11/10/2024. And then, for example, this Linux VM, we will start the replication, at, let's say, something like this, 12/12/2024. And then the Windows server here on the top, the 180 days start to count today. For the Linux VM, it starts at 12th of December of this year. So we have this 100 days for every VM, but for sure, when we start the replication today for all our VMs, we have 180 days counted from today that are for free for Azure Migrate. If we need more time, then we will have additional costs that are $25 per VM per month. So the reason for this is that the Azure Migrate is very similar to Azure Site Recovery. And Azure Site Recovery is a paid service. It's for free for the first 30 days. Azure Migrate was completely free in the past, and there were several customers, I also often recommended to use it like this, that used Azure Migrate as a replacement for Azure Site Recovery. And this is the reason why Microsoft has changed here the licensing terms in this way, that the first 180 days are for free. If you need more time, Azure Migrate will cost something.
Interesting point.
Okay. Then what I had in the past weeks about Azure Stack HCI, I often see that customers see Azure Stack HCI as a solution like Windows Server. It's released and we buy it. It's version 23H2, and then it works like it worked 2 weeks ago. You should always look at the what's new release notes if there are changes. So what I, for example, realized that the environment checker that runs within the deployment now is more granular. So you have the situation that you see more often failures there that say, okay, sorry, you cannot deploy this cluster because something is not fine in the network and so on. And customers sometimes say, oh, I always see new errors. these errors are based on the configuration. So it's not the situation that now you have more problems, but currently we have the situation with the last update 24.08.1 that Azure Stack HCI looks more accurate at your configuration. So in the past, you could have some misconfigurations in the network that you maybe did not realize or realized very late. So for example, VLAN configurations and things like this. So this is now more detailed, and it's always important to check the latest release notes, because with every new release, also something like this 24.08.1. This is only a small number, this .1, but they have changed some things within the deployment. So always look in the documentation. What's also new in this release, and I really like this, because now we can configure GPUs for Azure Stack HCI from the portal. This was not possible in the past. In the past, we always needed Windows Admin Center, and it's usually not the best experience if you have to switch between tools. You create the virtual machine via the Azure portal, and then you have to switch to the Windows Admin Center to add the GPU. And now it's possible to do this from the Azure portal. Today, it's only via CLI, so command line interface available. So it's not a user interface experience, but this is typically the first step. So in the past, for Azure Stack HCI, let's think about logical networks. In the first version, we could create logical networks via CLI, and a few weeks later, we had the graphical user interface there. So my expectation here is that in one of the next releases, we will see the GPU GUI interface in the Azure portal. Yeah. So
Well,
far
I
to
have
the
one
migration.
more
And
topic. So let's go to the myth busting, because very often we talk about the hypervisor. And I get so many questions these days if Hyper-V is dead, because a lot of people think that Hyper-V is really dead. They are looking for alternatives in the market to VMware. You know the situation, but they asked me if Hyper-V is a solution Microsoft still cares about, because we are not talking so often about Hyper-V. We discontinued the standalone Hyper-V version after Windows Server 2019. So what's the strategy of Hyper-V? This is what people ask me, and the answer is very simple. Hyper-V is something that's super relevant for Microsoft, because Hyper-V is part of Windows Server, part of Windows Client. Azure is running on Hyper-V. So Hyper-V is super critical for Microsoft, and we continue bringing new features to Hyper-V, and this is something you absolutely can rely on when you create your cluster on the hypervisor from Microsoft. But Hyper-V is not always Hyper-V. So it depends on where you get Hyper-V from. So when you're using Hyper-V in Azure, you always had some features you do not get for Hyper-V on Windows Server. On Azure Stack HCI, there's Hyper-V included, but this has some features included that are not in Hyper-V Windows Server. A lot of these, almost all the features, are coming now to Windows Server with the next version of Windows Server 2025. Hyper-V will get so many improvements and gets much closer to what customers had with VMware in the past. And the reason for that is absolutely because customers asked Microsoft to bring Hyper-V features to Windows Server because they need it, they want to use it. So the answer is very simple. Hyper-V is relevant, will be relevant in future, and this is a solution where you can bet on. What is the experience with Hyper-V? So you're a fan of Hyper-V for multiple of years. But if we compared it with VMware on some topics, it's very similar. But VMware had some features that were not included in Windows Server. But this is changing now, isn't it?
It's changing, absolutely. And this is interesting when we talk about this, let's say, comparison thing. Then many customers looked at Hyper-V in the days of Windows Server 2008, because this was so the time Windows Server 2008, 2008 R2, where still many customers were running on physical hardware and where they started their virtualization journey. And in those days, Hyper-V in the first version in Windows Server 2008 had a lot of limitations compared to VMware. But already in Windows Server 2012, 2012 R2, most of these gaps were closed, so that Hyper-V came very, very close to VMware. And as far as I know, I'm not a VMware expert, but as far as I know, the scalability of Hyper-V is today much higher than this is possible with VMware. So Hyper-V supports virtual machines with up to 2,000 virtual CPUs with up to, I would say, 24 terabytes of memory, so compute memory, up to 64 nodes, and so on. So really huge numbers in scalability. Yeah, here you have the numbers. It's 48 terabytes of memory on Hyper-V in Azure, and this is what comes to Hyper-V in Windows Server 2025. So it's true that today we don't have the same capabilities, but this will increase in the next version of Windows Server. And we had some limitations in Hyper-V also in the latest version in Windows Server 2022 regarding the GPU support. These limitations are already removed in Azure Stack HCI. So Azure Stack HCI already supports GPU partitioning and things like this. And this will also be available in the next version of Windows Server.
Yeah, so looking forward to the next version of Windows Server because it will be so powerful. And another question I get very often, if all the features of Hyper-V, storage spaces, direct, software-defined networking are coming to Windows Server, so why should I use Azure Stack HCI in future? So I could give you some answers on that, but I prefer to wait until Ignite, because I had to do a lot of spoiler and I'm not allowed to do that. And to talk about the full story, we need to wait for all these announcements.
Yeah, perfect.
More comments. There are several comparisons between Windows Server, Azure Stack HCI. I'm currently working, unifying them and have launched and published these from Azure. Okay, yeah, perfect. So thanks a lot, Carl, for all your things you are doing to make Azure Stack HCI better, to promote it in the market. So we know that you are a huge fan of Azure Stack HCI from the beginning.
Yeah, I'm often asked about these comparisons, and the problem of most comparison tables I know is that the products live. So there are new versions of Azure Stack HCI with new features. There are new releases of VMware with new features. For sure, maybe you also want to compare with Nutanix and things like other things. And so I usually tell the customers as an Hyper-V expert, please tell me what you need and I can explain you if this is available in Hyper-V or not. And the interesting thing is, I nearly never have the situation that a customer addresses a feature that is not available in Hyper-V. So if I would compare the products one-to-one, I will see differences at several details, but the really needed features in the data centers of the customers, scalable VMs, high availability, live migration, performance in the network, and so on, this is all possible in Hyper-V. Sometimes with different tools, completely different tools than we have in the other hypervisors, but we can solve nearly every requirement with Azure Stack HCI already today, because we have the GPU partitioning and so on with Windows Server, then in the future with the next release.
Yeah, and there are so many layers you have to compare. It's not all Azure Stack HCI is an operating system. It's also the question, what's running on Azure Stack HCI and what's not running on Windows Server. So when we're talking about Azure Arc, for example, or if we're talking about Azure Kubernetes services, or tools like the Arc Resource Bridge. So sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. If you're using System Center, for example, some things are possible, but this is not related to Windows Server. It's related to a service on top of Windows Server, so System Center, for example. And there will be a new version of System Center 2025. And a lot of things will happen when this new System Center will be available. And about many of these things we are able to talk after Ignite as well. But you also have a Windows Server launch tour in Germany, Manfred.
Yeah, this is correct. We have a Windows Server launch tour in the first 2 weeks in November, where we are focused on Windows Server. So there's a small session where we also talk about Azure Stack HCI to have exactly this information about what's the comparison. There we will focus on the Windows Server operating system, because you mentioned that many exciting things. Maybe we will talk about Azure Stack HCI after Ignite. For Windows Server, the next version, we already know what will be there regarding the functionality. This is exactly what we will cover in the Windows Server launch tour. So the Hyper-V new features, the Active Directory news, the storage spaces direct news in a full day event.
Yeah, so here you can see the dates. It's from November 4th to November 14th. It's 6 locations all across Germany. So if you want to dive a little bit deeper into the next version of Windows Server, this could be a very good option. So you see Manfred and the other MVP, Carsten Raffa, are very famous in the German-speaking market already. So these two experts are talking about that. Why is this before the Ignite? It's because November 1st is the official kickoff date of Windows Server. So it will be GA that day. And we will have official decks. We can share presentations and things like that. So only
and when we
2.5
planned the
more
tour, we didn't know when Windows Server will be available, and we even didn't know when Ignite will be. So at this time where we decided to do this tour, Ignite was not announced, and Windows Server release dates were not announced. We only knew that Windows Server will release this year. And usually December is not the best time to do something like this. And in the end of November, I already had the hybrid conference planned in Würzburg. And so we decided to do it in the first 2 weeks of November. And this is the reason why it's before Ignite. But I mentioned this regarding Windows Server. We already know a lot about the product. So it's not the situation that we have to tell you at every feature we have to wait for Ignite. So we really can show you a lot of the new features in Windows Server 2025.
Yeah, and Jeff Woolsey told at Ignite, or around about Ignite 1 year ago, that features like Stretch Cluster will come to Windows Server. And of course, a lot of Azure Stack HCI customers are curious about Stretch Cluster. So we have not heard since then what the future of Stretch Cluster will be. But as it's coming to Windows Server, of course, everyone expects that it will come back to Azure Stack HCI again. But at the Windows Server launch tour, hopefully you can talk about Stretch Cluster as well.
Yeah,
we know if all the Windows Server features will be available from the beginning, or will some be a little bit late?
I don't have an official information about this, but
Okay.
when you look at the feature set, then there's the situation, for example, like Active Directory news. They are in there since end of last year, so we can already test this since nearly 12 months. And there are other features that are brand new released in the last weeks in the preview. And so it might, when you ask me, would it be from a technical perspective maybe recommended to have them in a later time to give them some time for additional testing? I would say absolutely yes. They work very good, but we all can access the preview. This is a public preview when we can look at the features, and some of them are in a very, let's say, more early state, and some of them are really completely finalized: Active Directory in use, Hyper-V GPU partitioning, and things like this. So I don't know if this might happen in Azure Stack HCI. We have this already, that we have new features that are released on a regular basis. In Windows Server, the story in the past was a little bit different. In the past, the information was always, we have a new release every 2 to 3 years. So I don't know if they will be released or if there will be features that maybe will be added afterwards. In the preview, we have all the things that were promised we can have a look at. Yeah.
Okay, that's
So
good.
there's nothing completely missing, but it's a difference since when the features are in the preview. Yeah.
Okay. But we can expect that they will be coming to Windows Server maybe a little bit later, and we do not have to wait for a release 2. So as
yeah, this is I don't know how the story will be there, but my expectation is that everything that was promised at Ignite last year will really be released in this version. Yeah.
Yeah. Very soon we will know, but now we are at the end of the hour. And we already said that the next Azure Stack HCI show will be after Ignite, or in the week of Ignite, so November 22nd. So we will look forward to that. It's 2 hours later as usual, because Manfred will be in Chicago and we will stream live from Chicago and Munich. So bookmark this into your calendar. We promise you a lot of interesting news. So this time we really knew that they are coming. It's not a guess, it's something we knew, and you should not miss that session. And in the meantime, this is a website I created. Hopefully you're familiar with that, where I put all the information I have about Azure Stack HCI and Windows Server on. It's a website where you find all documents, contacts, best practices, case studies, whatever you need about Azure Stack HCI. So whenever there's an announcement, whenever there's something new, you will find that on that website also. And I highly recommend you to follow us on LinkedIn. So Manfred and me in person. So we have our personal LinkedIn account where we are doing a lot of postings. But if you're only interested in Azure Stack HCI, then there is an Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk channel on LinkedIn. And here we are going to post all the news live at the moment when they appear. So please follow this Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk on LinkedIn, and you do not miss anything. So for our German friends, every time when there's an Azure Stack HCI show, there's a hybrid show in the morning. So the hybrid show will be in the next 2 weeks. So only the Azure Stack HCI show will not be. So hybrid show is about everything that's hybrid. So Windows Server, Azure Stack HCI, other technologies, MVPs, Eric and Manfred. So this morning they talked about in detail about the Azure Migrate. So everything is available on demand on Manfred's YouTube channel. So if you want to have a little bit deeper information about Azure Migrate, I recommend to go on Manfred Helper's YouTube channel and look for the hybrid show. Another show Manfred is doing is the Azure Arc show. And Now you can see Alexander Orter. The logo is gone. Alexander Orter, Microsoft colleague, and Manfred are doing the Azure Arc show. Azure Arc is super interesting. That's an important technology. Unfortunately, if I ask 100 customers or partners who is familiar with Azure Arc, only maximum of 5 hands are going up. So Azure Arc is absolutely a very important technology. It's for free, but it brings a lot of services from Azure to the non-Azure infrastructure. So if you do not know Azure Arc, make yourself familiar. One option is the Azure Arc show, and October 21st, 1 p.m. German time, the next Azure Arc show will be. Manfred Helber's YouTube channel is the source where you can get it. Then we have the Windows Business Solution Club calendar. So this is an option where you can bring all the events we are doing to your calendar. And here, manfredhelber.de/calendar is the source where you get information from how to bring the events to your Outlook calendar. And that's it for today. Nothing more to share. So I say thank you. Goodbye. Have a nice weekend. Prepare yourself for Ignite. Be as curious as we are. And as always, the last famous words are Manfred's. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Nice weekend, and I'm looking forward to see you online on 22nd of November with a lot of news we will share there. See you. Bye.